The game. This story starts in June of 1997. Vernon Smith, Jag to his online buddies, knew that he was a smart kid. He knew that he was smarter than most 15-year-olds, even the most computer-literate ones. Heck, he knew that he was smarter than most adults. He had all sorts of skills that just mystified his parents. He felt so sorry for them. Computers were where the future lay. Couldn't they see that? His mother didn't know the difference between a modem and a mouse, and his father was hardly any better. At least they were generous enough to update his system every year. After all, he never asked them to spend money on anything else. He wasn't interested in foreign holidays. He wasn't into sports or any pastimes that required other expensive equipment. He didn't possess a PlayStation, Xbox, or any other video game system. He never asked for game software for his PC. He never used it for playing games. Well, of course, that was apart from the game. Jag was quite happy to use his beloved computer to help with his schoolwork. In fact, his intimate knowledge of how to find information on the internet ensured that his grades were always way better than average in every subject apart from physical education. Well, there was not much he could do about that online, was there? He had been an avid internet user virtually since public access to the system had been readily available, and he had won the argument to have a dedicated phone line installed in his room, for which he paid himself. His source of income? The internet, naturally. Well, at the moment, not actually the net itself, but he was making a reasonable amount of money from local businesses who could see the direction in which the future lay and were prepared to pay a knowledgeable lad for some advice and perhaps a design for a website. It did not take him long to build up a circle of internet friends, mainly boys of similar age to himself, located all over the world, whose main interest was the internet itself. These were all individuals who were willing to embrace the technology without the reservation of the older generation. He talked to them individually and in groups through the auspices of various individual messaging systems and the benevolence of IRC, the so-called Internet Relay Chat, the technology that allowed the creation and existence of chat rooms. His interest was almost exclusively based on the system itself, how it worked, why it worked, and most importantly, what direction it might take in the future. There was one exception, and that was the game. Jag rated his memory as almost photographic, but for some reason he could not exactly recall when he had first started to play the game. He had never been interested in board games such as Monopoly, and role-playing games such as the original Dungeons and Dragons just left him cold. That sort of thing was for weird kids with no lives and strange imaginations. Having said that, there was something about the game that was different. It was a role-playing game, and was obviously based on the original Dungeons and Dragons concept. Each player created a persona for themselves that inhabited a strange and mystical realm known as Infernus. The persona could interact with the environment and with other personas it encountered. These other personas were either other players or ones controlled by the artificial intelligence of the game itself. Each persona started off its life in Infernus as a lowly serf. The object of the game was to rise up through the various possible hierarchical positions until the status of Lord of Infernus was reached. There were 3 paths that could be taken: the warrior, the sage, or the wizard, who could be male or female. Basically, a player had the choice of fighting their way to the top of the pile, thinking their way there, or getting there by magic. Progression through the various ranks was by accumulation of game points, which were obtained by various methods. There were other points systems concerned with the persona's health, their fighting strength, their level of wisdom, and their ability to perform magic. Matters were complicated by the fact that a warrior was expected to have certain wisdom and be able to perform some magic. A sage also had to know some magic and be able to fight if required, and a wizard, in true Gandalf style, had to be wise enough to know when it was clobbering time. Players, or rather their personas, were encouraged to interact with each other within the game, and at a number of locations such as inns and meeting houses were set aside for the purpose. These were like safe houses, as the game engine prevented any form of fighting or magic, thereby encouraging conversation. There were not many rules governing conduct in the playing of the game. but there was an overriding one concerning conduct in the real world. It was acceptable to inform a friend that you played the game, but not under any circumstances was it allowable to reveal the identity of your persona. To do so involved immediate termination of the right to play. A player was expected to make his way to Lordship of Infernus by his own effort, and collusion between personas was strictly forbidden. Even the names of personas were assigned after the player had entered certain details. Jag had started his game life as Bosco Tar the Serf. After months of play, he had attained the rank of Under-Assistant Magus as he had elected the path of a wizard. Of course, along the way he had died many times. At least each time a persona was terminated, they did not slide back to square one. That would have been too frustrating, but they did lose the last 3 levels attained. Jag was not exactly addicted to the game, but he did log on to the site once or twice a week to take Bosco through his paces a little, but otherwise he mainly logged on to go to one of the safe places and chat to other players. Of late, his visits to Infernus had increased slightly in frequency, as there was an interesting rumour running around. The game was purely text-based, which was fine as far as Jag was concerned, as he considered himself to have a really good imagination. Now it seemed there were plans afoot to present the world of Infernus as a 3-dimensional environment. The game was rumoured to be converting to a graphical engine. This fascinated Jag. He wondered how the scenes he had created in his imagination would compare with the ideas of whoever was creating the look of the 3D environment. For the very first time, he thought about trying to get in touch with whoever was behind the game. Now this presented a bit of a problem. There was no direct method of contacting whoever administrated the game. There was no admin at infernus.com who could be emailed. Apart from the safe areas within the game which were apparently unsupervised or invigilated, there was no chat room in which a game moderator was in attendance and could deal with queries. The nearest thing to a line of communication was a bulletin board, which ran on an old and extremely creaky BBS engine. Comments could be posted and signed only by the name of the persona. If necessary, the player would be contacted via email, which was always from the Overlord of Infernus. Jag had received just one of these in his time playing the game, when he had first started, informing him of his persona's name and login details. Strangely, there was no return email address, and he was unable to discern one, no matter how many property boxes he opened. He didn't want to post something on the bulletin board, as that was open to the scrutiny of anyone playing the game. He thought that a gushing comment and question about the graphics engine would make him look like some sort of sycophantic fanboy, what his net friends in the US would call lame. He knew from conversation with his online buddies, plus observation when he was surfing, that great strides forward were being made in internet graphic capabilities, and perhaps users might be a little sensitive and not wish to give away too much information. The field of graphic engine design was very competitive. In fact, it was an area that Jag had considered for his future. Graphics engines for game software. Not just computer games, but the software used by the various standalone games machines, such as the Sony PlayStation. Although he himself was not interested in the current vogue of shoot-'em-ups and so-called platform games, he was well aware of their tremendous popularity within his peer group at school. He believed that this popularity would never diminish, providing the software houses kept pushing at the limits of the systems for which they were programming. This area was big business, and he was sure that there was plenty of money to be made by someone with the right skills and talent, even if they didn't like the games themselves. So what should he do? He knew that the worst thing he could do would be nothing. At the very worst, he could make an inquiry and be rebuffed. He really had nothing to lose but his pride. He had ultimate recourse to the bulletin board, but that really would be his least favourite option. Imagine his surprise, therefore, one Wednesday evening as he logged into the game. He noticed a new icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the login screen, a button marked Chat Room. He immediately placed his cursor over the icon, but for some reason he hesitated in clicking the mouse button. Something just plain did not feel right. There had been no indication that a dedicated chat room was to be set up. Of course, under the rules of the game, it was not possible to have an external chat room. Oh well, nothing ventured. Nothing gained. He clicked the icon. His screen cleared and a fairly standard-looking chatroom login window opened. He entered his character's name as prompted, then a new window opened, again very much resembling the standard chatroom format. There was a box to enter your text at the bottom and a side window showing who is currently present in the room. A message appeared in the main text area. Bosco Tar has entered the chatroom. The name appeared in the side window. There was currently only one other occupant according to the list. Overlord. Jag entered a greeting. Hello. The response was more or less instantaneous, so much so that Jag wondered if it was programmed in. Greetings, Bosco Tar, under Assistant Magus. Well, that was encouraging. Time for a question. How long has the chat room been open? This is the first time I have seen it. Again, the answer appeared to be instantaneous. It was open just as you entered from outside. You are first. First? Jag didn't know whether to be pleased, flattered, or whatever. Something inside him seemed uneasy. This was not what he had expected. What does first mean? First means that you are chosen. Chosen implies selection. Why have I been selected, and what for? The feeling of uneasiness remained. Jag felt that the hairs on the back of his neck might start to rise at any moment. You have risen through the ranks from serf to under Assistant Magus in extraordinarily rapid time. This marks you as one to observe. Overlord has been observing you and is pleased in what he sees. He has therefore chosen you. Jag shivered as if an icy hand had gripped his heart. Without thinking, his left forefinger shot out and hit the reset button mounted on the front panel of the desktop casing. The chat room screen died away instantly to be replaced by the boot-up screen. For some reason, Jag still felt uneasy, and he hit the power switch. The display immediately died as the monitor was powered from the desktop unit. It was 2 days before his curiosity got the better of him. He had argued with himself and convinced himself that his feeling of uneasiness was groundless. He logged into the game and found the chat room icon in the same place. He clicked on it and logged into the chat room. Again, his arrival was announced and he found himself in the sole presence of Overlord. This time, he was addressed first. Welcome, Bosco Tar, first of the chosen. Jag needed information. Please tell me what function I have been chosen to fulfill. The answer came back immediately. You have been chosen to serve. Another riddle. What do I have to do in order to serve? The first steps on that pathway you have already taken. Take the path that leads you to Infernus. More confusion. How do I get there? Continue on your pathway. When your steps falter, assistance will be given. The screen flickered and he found himself back at the main game login screen. The chatroom icon was no longer visible. Jag was mystified. What was all that nonsense about being chosen and serving? What was meant by the pathway? The obvious thing that came to mind was the object of the game itself, to rise up through the various levels in order to obtain the ultimate rank of Lord of Infernus. That was sort of taking a pathway. What he had been told did not seem to make an awful lot of sense, other than the fact that some sort of assistance was being offered if his steps should falter. Did that mean that there was some sort of hint sheet to be made available, or perhaps some cheats? Oh well, if he had been chosen, no doubt whoever had chosen him would make everything clear in the fullness of time. Over the next few months he continued making his irregular visits to the game. The chat room icon was not in evidence. Jag decided that maybe it had been discontinued. After all, what was the point of a chat room that only ever seemed to get one visitor? During this interval, he progressed a bit further in the rankings, attaining the status of Magus Magori. As seems to be usual in these sorts of games, the further one progressed, the more difficult progression seemed to become. He began to wonder if he would ever achieve the ultimate goal. His thoughts naturally turned to what he had seemed to have been told in the chat room. He had been floundering around as a Magus Magori for some time now. How would the system know that his steps were faltering, if that was indeed the criterion for being given assistance? He supposed that there was some sort of statistical engine that kept track of how long each player spent attempting each task or whatever mechanism they were using to progress themselves through the game. He was surprised on the Wednesday of the following week, on arriving home from school at 4 p.m, to find that Royal Mail had tried to deliver a package addressed to him. They had left one of their calling cards informing him that he could pick up the package from the sorting office and that a signature would be required. Jag was intrigued, as he had no idea what the package might be. His parents were both out at work and would not be home until after 6 o'clock. The sorting office was not that far away, so he decided to take a bit of a stroll into town and pick it up. It only took him 20 minutes to walk to the sorting office. The employee behind the counter accepted the calling card without comment and disappeared behind a partition. He reappeared shortly carrying a fairly substantial-looking brown cardboard box. Jag wondered if he would be able to manage it. The Royal Mail person must have guessed what he was thinking, as he made a comment saying that the package was not really that heavy, and would he please print here and sign there. Jag did so and took possession of this mysterious object. The post person had been correct. The package was not really that heavy and was reasonably easy to carry, despite its bulk. He had no trouble walking home with it. When he got back to the house, it was still only 10 minutes to 5. He took the parcel up to his room to open it. It was addressed to him, the address being visible on a document in a clear plastic envelope adhering to the upper side of the parcel. He first cut this open and removed what looked like an invoice. The dispatch address was given merely as Overlord in Furness. The invoice described the enclosed goods as ancillary equipment, and the price quoted was FOC, which Jag interpreted as free of charge. Intrigued, he split the tape that sealed the package and opened up the cardboard box. Inside was what looked like a cyclist's safety helmet, with a blanked-out visor, a pair of gloves with wires attached to them, a PC circuit board, some other wiring and connectors, together with a power supply. Jag knew exactly what this equipment was. It was a virtual reality headset, virtual reality gloves, their power supply, and the controller card that would allow them to operate with his computer system. This was state-of-the-art technology. Further rummaging in the packing material produced a pair of CD-ROMs. One evidently contained the software drivers that would allow the computer to interact with the new hardware. The other one was merely labelled Infernus Patch. He also found a printed pamphlet which gave instructions on how to install the hardware and the drivers. There was nothing that referred to the Infernus CD-ROM. Wow, the sheer implications. Not just conversion from text only to 3D graphics, but the step beyond that to an interactive virtual environment. And he, Jag, or rather Bosco, was being given special privileged access to this world. Wow! This must be the assistance he had been told about. He could barely contain himself during the evening meal with his parents. He had decided to wait until after they had eaten, in order to be absolutely sure that he had time to install the hardware and software without interruption. He excused himself from the dining table as early as he could, without wanting to give offence, and told his parents that he wanted to work on a homework project, and that he probably wouldn't be coming downstairs again that evening. This was something he did from time to time when he was particularly enthusiastic about something, so his parents were not unduly bothered. Without wishing to seem too hasty, he went back up to his room and removed everything that had been in the package. He read all the instructions very carefully, twice. He made sure that all the items referred to were, in fact, present in the package. He then disconnected his computer system from its protected power supply, lifted the monitor off the desktop case, and removed the screws that held the main casing in place. He had 3 spare slots available for expansion cards at the rear of his motherboard. He carefully removed a metal blank from the rear of the machine, and then slid the VR controller card into one of the slots, securing it where the blanking plate had been removed. That was it. There were no other connections to be made, so he replaced the main casing and secured it. Before replacing the monitor, he connected the headset and the gloves to the ports that the new card now provided at the rear of his system. He then reconnected the computer to its power supply and plugged in the VR gear transformer to a spare socket position on the protected supply. He then powered up everything and let the system boot. It was the work of a few minutes to load the software drivers. Then he placed the Infernus Patch CD-ROM into the drive. The system whirred and clicked to itself for a few seconds. Then he found himself looking at a very high-resolution version of the game logo on the screen, along with an instruction that it was now time to don the VR gear. Making sure that there was no way that the cables could get snagged or tangled up, he pulled on the gloves, which were extremely thin and lightweight, hardly giving any sensation to denote their presence on his hands. He then placed the helmet over his head, adjusted its straps to give a comfortable fit, and then used the pair of knurled knobs provided to adjust the internal goggles so that they matched the spacing of his eyes. All was currently in darkness, but the circuits were apparently live, as he could hear a faint hiss through the built-in headphones. He jumped slightly as a deep voice, apparently behind him, told him to raise his right hand when he was ready. He complied with this instruction, and immediately a large parchment scroll appeared hovering in the darkness before him. Next to the scroll floated a quill, its feather dull black and its nib steel bright. The deep voice told him to take the quill and sign the parchment at the bottom. He seemed to float forward under the power of his own thought, his right hand automatically grasping the quill. The feedback receptors in the gloves must have been really sensitive, as it felt as if something was really in his hand. He looked at the parchment, which was covered in some sort of runes, a line with a cross next to it indicating where he should sign. Without thinking, he scrawled his own name at the bottom of the parchment. The ink that flowed from the nib was rich and dark red, very much like blood. As soon as his signature was complete, the parchment and the quill vanished. He was in complete disorientating darkness for a moment, and then there was light. He found himself standing on what appeared to be a very bleak and barren piece of heathland. In front of him there appeared a faint trail, and next to him was an ancient-looking signpost with but one word inscribed upon it: Infernus. The way indicated was the direction taken by the faint path. The mere thought of walking seemed to move him forward, so he found himself following the path, seeming to glide just above the beaten earth. On and on he travelled, scarcely aware of the passage of time. After a while, it seemed that there was a sort of fetid aroma in the air. This he could not understand. VR could give sight, sound, and a certain amount of touch, but aroma? Ahead he could see that the ground was now leading gradually downward. The path followed the decline and started to wind a bit. It was now clear that he was descending into a valley, the pathway now more clearly defined, as it was etching deeper and deeper into the blackened earth. After what now seemed like at least another hour or so, and a descent of several hundred feet, he turned a final bend to find himself on a deserted river bank. The path ran on straight towards a dilapidated-looking wooden jetty, which poked out into the turgid waters of the broad river which he now stood beside. Whoever had done the programming for these graphics had certainly got a feel for the place, he thought, giving a bit of a shiver as he felt the river's dampness trying to seep his body warmth from him. The river flowed sluggishly, and he was reminded of the description of the foul waterway that flowed through Ankh-Morpork in the Discworld novels by Terry Pratchett. It was indeed an extremely broad waterway. He could not see the other side. It was lost in a sort of mist. But by the one-way flow, he knew that this must be a river and not a lake. He walked to the jetty and along its crumbling length. This was definitely the end of the path. There was nowhere else to go, so obviously this was his intended destination. Or maybe not. As he looked into the distance, a shape took form. Something was moving towards him. After a while, it became recognizable as some sort of boat. The words ferry boat formed in his mind. It was obvious. He was standing on the jetty, and the ferry boat was coming to pick him up to take him to the other side. He looked down, and for the first time realized that he was clad in some sort of coarsely woven dark brown robes. The robes came with pockets, and he now slid his hand inside them, glad to slightly relieve the chill he was now feeling. First aroma and now temperature sensitivity. This VR was certainly absolute state-of-the-art gear. The boat eventually reached the jetty and slid to a silent halt. The boatman at the rear looked like some sort of monk. He was dressed in black robes, and his face was hidden by the cowl. He extended an arm as if bidding Jag to climb aboard, which he did. The the boatman pushing away from the jetty with his long pole as soon as he sat on the one available thwart. The crossing proceeded in absolute silence. Jag had no idea how long it took, as there was no real way of determining time as the boat glided through the mist. Eventually the far shore came in sight, their destination being a jetty, which could have been the duplicate of the one they had left behind them. Jag could see that the path continued up the far side of the river bank, the only clue to its destination being a dull red glow that he could only now just discern in the murky sky ahead. For the first time, he felt slightly uneasy. He stood to leave the boat, but the boatman barred his way with his pole. "First, you must pay me." The voice was a dry whisper, like old leaves shifting in a winter wind. Jag's hands scrabbled in his pockets again. He brought the right one out, gripping an oversized copper coin, which he offered to the boatman. "Who are you?" "I am the ferryman." The figure passed its arm over Jag's hand, and the coin disappeared. "Now you have paid me, you may go." The pole was lowered. "The ferryman?" Memories of a Chris de Burgh song, a favourite of his mother's, came to mind, something about not paying the ferryman until he got you to the other side. "But what is your name?" "My name." A gasp of deathly laughter seemed to escape from beneath the hood, and a real chill struck at Jag's heart. "I have no mortal name, but I am known as Charon, ferryman of the Styx." "Oh, my name is—" He found he could not remember his name. The ghostly laugh came again. "You have no mortal name here. You are no longer mortal. Welcome to Infernus." "Infernus," echoed the newly departed. "Yes, Infernus is the Latin name. In English you would call it Hell."